Welcome to the Takeoff Podcast, the go-to construction podcast for construction professionals seeking inspiration, education, or motivation for the next steps in their career. Each Monday, you'll be joined by me, Mick Donaghy, Managing Director of Gedden Executive Recruitment and a respected name from the industry, a construction leader, a business owner, or someone in the thick of the action. The whole premise of this podcast is for you to get something from it, an idea, a connection, a mentor, whatever it is. I hope you get it, and I hope you enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The Takeoff. Today on the show, I'm excited to be joined by Julian Hemms. Julian is the managing partner of Robbins Partners. With over 25 years of experience in the building, infrastructure, oil and gas industries throughout the UK and Australia, Julian specializes in commercial advisory, pre- and post-contract management, claims, disputes, and complex transaction management. Having worked for major companies such as Lendlease, Lang O'Rourke, Hill International, and HKA, at senior levels such as regional commercial manager, associate director, and director, Julian knows a thing or two about the construction industry, especially within the quantity surveying and commercial markets. I'm really excited to have you on the show today, Julian. Julian, do you mind giving us a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do? I never feel I can do it proper justice.
Thank you, Mick. No, I think that's covered off quite a lot of it. It's now hit, I think July the 4th becomes 30 years in industry. I was very lucky really to make a start at 17 in Gloucester in quantity surveying. I've been lucky enough to work with some incredible individuals over this career. Well, halfway through, nowadays with the way things are going. And being lucky enough, as you say, to work with some top end companies and have some strong leadership positions in those of managing people and mentoring and coaching and being exposed to some really, really interesting mega projects, but also small projects, because they also have some fundamental issues and are just sometimes as challenging as the big ones. Yeah.
No, that's a really great point. I was speaking to someone recently, and they mentioned that they may begin, working on a 5-year project, and sometimes working on smaller projects with a little bit of a faster turnover can offer that bit more variety and appeal. So that's a great point. How did you get involved in the industry, Julian? What made you sort of start off within quantity surveying?
So the long and the short of it was my parents said, well, you're going to have to sort yourself out at 17. We got no money to send you to university, your problem. They're like, okay, fine. So I started to look around for jobs, and this job came up as an office junior at a quantity surveying company. Sometimes to this day, I'm still not sure what a quantity surveyor does, but I took the role as an office junior. Why not? My actual career path was intended to do German and business, because I studied German and always had a passion for Germany and German things. Started off on that and basically got onto the degree course in quantity surveying. Did the first year and a half, and then at 19 I became a dad. So it was like, I better start having to pay for things as well. And I thought, well, I'll see this through, and then I'll still do my German in management. I'll do that. And then about 4 years in, I thought, well, actually, I really enjoy this. It's been a great 4 to 5 years doing this. So why the heck would I redo a degree? Like most people, I think, just fell into it. I went to a very traditional boys' grammar school, and, their idea of career advice would be, because it was back in those days, that all women would be typists or nurses, and all men would either, in our circumstances, would be you go in the army or you do something else incredibly traditional. So the quantity surveying course as it is, and as a lot of roles in construction have diversified too, are quite what they would consider vocational. So for context, it used to be that they would call universities red brick versus others, polytechnics. So I went to what was a polytechnic, or then became called a university, just to confuse matters. But that's effectively how I got into it, and just learned really quickly and enjoyed it. I've always loved language in particularly. So the fact that we do a lot of contract law and contract administration and contract preparation, and contract administration in its truest sense is not what a contract administrator is called over here. So there was a lot of work in that which just fascinated me. And in terms of the true QSing, when I was brought up measuring bills of quantities, using what we used to call cut and shuffle, where you'd have a pack like this of little small paper, and you'd have to write your descriptions on there and put your DIMs in there, and then you put all that together, and then you'd send it. This is back in '94. You'd send it into a typing pool that types the bill of quantities, which to people here nowadays probably sat going, "What is this guy talking about?" But that's what used to happen 30 years ago when I first came into industry. And it was just really in a cusp of, for those nostalgic and interested, between SMM6 and SMM7. So I actually ended up learning thoroughly both methods. And the guy that trained me made me go home and memorize and cite every single section, which sadly to this day I can remember most of them. So it worked. So that's really how I came into industry, and the projects I was doing early doors. And I would recommend anybody who comes in, the small projects is how you'll get the quickest experience. I did a lot of pubs, no complaints, and I did a lot of housing stuff. Housing associations when I first came in, so I got to see quite a good spread of the building side. 97, I think it was. Decided that I liked it all, but I wasn't really convinced on what I was saying as I was coming through as a trainee stroke assistant QS, as they used to be called back then. And I'm sat there arguing with contractors about it should be, let's just make it up, $20 a square meter. Oh gosh, we are completely converted now. £20 a square meter for whatever it was. And I thought, I actually don't know. I ain't got a bloody clue. I mean, I'm reading Wessex, I'm reading Spons, I'm reading Laxton's, and I'm just pulling these things out of this book, but I've got no idea how these rates were built. Got none. So how am I going to do that? And that's when I decided it was time to move across, which I did, to work for contractors. So I could actually say, well, I know what rate is and how it's comprised and how it's built, and actually what the labour is and all those things. Although I do accept, as you moved into probably the early to mid 2000s, it actually became more subcontract, so it sort of lost some of its thing. But the ability to build up first principles cost rates was something that was one of the drivers for me. So I just don't like being in a position where I know some people are comfortable, where I'm basically blagging it and going, well, I think it's that, and it's this and it's that, and having no clue how it's built up, what it's comprised, and having the courage and conviction to back yourself, because you just don't know. So that was really why I made the transition 26, 27 years ago into working for tier one contractors, well, small companies, and then into tier ones. Yeah.
Well, was it easy making that transition? Because there's quite a lot of people nowadays would struggle, getting a contractor interested in them if their experience has always been purely in a consultancy. So what was that back then? Was the demand just really, really strong, or did you have similar sort of objections or anything like that, Julian?
Oh, look, you'd still have the same objections back then, mate. I think, the difference is that when you're 3 to 4 years in, people take the view they can shape you, because you come in and it's like an assistant QS level, If you're coming in and, for talking's sake, you're 8-10 years in consulting, you've got MRICS, and therefore you think you're a commercial manager. You're not, right? You're just not on the client side. And so you'd have to be willing and receptive to take a step down the chain, in order to work your way up. But people don't do that. But I mean, when I came to Australia, I took 2 steps down to get going again. That was just a purely strategic idea. I had to see if I could do it again in another country. But it's certainly that challenge. The big difference, I think, is that, and you'll see it a lot here, is the PQSs, as they're called in the UK, that they're not really called anything over here, really. They come across as quite polished. So it's that sort of different approach to that, and they're very, very client facing, as opposed to, if you're coming from a contracting side, my personal view is you've got to be interested in actually how you put the thing together, how the rates are comprised, how the interfaces work, and actually want to go out, walk on site, and see how things are built. Fundamentally, if you don't really like those sort of things, then moving to work for a contractor really isn't the thing for you.
No, 100%. It's quite interesting how the role is so different in Australia compared to the UK. It's something that this is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast, is to try and educate those maybe looking to make that move, from the UK to Australia, to give them real insight that it's very, very different, What was it you loved at that stage? You mentioned obviously you had a child on the way, there was a real necessity to bring some money for the door. What was it that you really enjoyed about quantity surveying at that stage? Was it the construction? Was it the people? What was it? Right, guys, so I'm absolutely pumped to say the Takeoff podcast is proud to be sponsored by RIB Software, the company behind some of the leading estimating software in the entire planet, including Costex, Candy, CX, and more. So firstly, if you didn't know, RIB are a powerhouse at providing innovative software solutions to the construction and engineering markets. They have over 500,000 users globally, are known universally as a solution provider for your entire project lifecycle, from planning to construction and beyond. RIB solutions help to ultimately connect people, processes, and data, so your project comes within budget, on time, and to the quality desired, all whilst reducing your business's carbon footprint. All this stuff matters, and RIB has the solutions. So if you're interested in finding out more, get on over to rib-software.com, reach out to your local team and quote Takeoff Podcast. For every listener who buys a subscription of RIB Costex, they will provide one free online training course. Okay, guys, back to the episode.
Do you know, I think it's a combination of all of those things. If I reflect on, say, 2003, I think it was 2003 or 2001. I was lucky enough to build the National Velodrome in Wales, in Newport, and that's where the wife's from, right? And her dad was a carpenter, so been around the world, done all that sort of stuff, and to be able to get him to come out to site, which he did, come and visit, because I had the privilege of being the boss in the QS site, and getting him to actually put one of the nails into the track. I mean, he's passed now, but that was just great. And actually being able to have those stories. So he was, my father-in-law was very much an inspiration in terms of that construction side. So I loved the fact that you stood there, or when I was driving in the car, you go past and go, I was involved with that. When I was involved with that, when I was, down the M5, you could see stuff from there. Or when you're driving through, they go, yeah, I did the Whittington Inn, which is a 1400 grade 1 listed building where you actually do put poo on walls. The wall and daub is a real thing. It does happen. And then the analysis piece, having to use your brain to analyze contracts, interpret, apply. I love that side of things, and then also being able to argue your point constructively, not with a table banging, door kicking that you sometimes see nowadays, more prevalent. And also then I find, bizarrely, measurement and the measurement side of things is actually very therapeutic, because you have to switch off and you start to think logically. And, anyone who can do measuring properly or that will always tell you, and it applies so regularly, and this is where the skill sets are being lost, is if you can't measure it, you can't build it. And that's very true. I mean, I go back in the bad old days. We worked for architects. Architects put the drawings together. We would raise what were called TQs then through a fax machine. Wow, that thing doesn't even still gets recognized in contracts. But anyway. And you'd write out your TQ on there and say, well, this is actually, what it was. And you'd end up asking questions, which would then do the coordination piece, which nowadays is apparently done really well, but I don't think it is, by BIM, the 3D modeling. So that skill set you start to see lost. And you go, well, how's that become relevant? Well, the QS role, whilst very diluted in Australia, it very much is still actually, if it was embraced properly, can fill a huge gap. And that is in scope writing. So, okay, you may not necessarily say it's 20 square meters of brickwork, half a brick thick or whatever it is anymore, or 50 cube of C40 or C35 concrete or whatever it may well be. But having to write that and say, what's actually in the package? What am I actually buying? And how do I value it? And that skill set's still there, but that is not used well at all. And that is where you see a lot of disputes are coming up. Certainly in my field that I spend nowadays, you look at the 4 pillars of what makes a contract: scope, cost, time, and quality. Well, generally, the amount of arguments I've ever been involved with around liabilities or third-party indemnities or warranties, they're pretty minimal. It's usually, am I entitled to an extension of time? Am I entitled to a variation? Am I entitled to a valuation? How is it valued? And is it or is it not in scope? So that skill set still to me is very, very important. It just doesn't get used appropriately or adequately. That side of things, I still find even just sitting down writing a scope of works, which I do from time to time for certain people, therapeutic, because it clears your head and you actually think, well, how does this work? How does this work? How do I put the interfaces together? How do I put the gaps in there? How do I ensure that what I'm buying in, and then how do I make sure it's value for money? So
the QS role it has so many facets that are involved in it, and that's something that I think that I'm not too sure whether it's a branding issue or whether the industry in Australia isn't maybe aware of what a QS can get involved in. Like there's estimating, there's the pre-contract services, there's the commercial advisory, contract management, risk management, procurement. There's so many different areas that a QS can get involved in. Was there anything at that point in your career, within the first 10 years that you really, really enjoyed, or was it the real, variety in the role, Julian?
Oh, look, it had to be variety, right? So, I mean, up until 2000, so 2007 is when I actually joined Bovis Lendlease. Up until then, I'd done a lot more working purely for contractors in the delivery space, right? And I'd done a bit of pre-contract side of things as well. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. But I thought, well, I always wanted to be as best as I could a rounded individual and have experience across the park. So I actually moved in 2009 with Bovis Lendlease into like what they had as a sort of a cost planning manager role, and reported into an absolute legend of a guy. So that was moving into cost planning and estimating, because I actually did fancy the change of doing the pre-contract stuff. So once you've done sort of 10 to 12 years in that field, you realize, well, I'm constantly fighting the battle in delivery of fixing the problems that have occurred prior to the point. And you can either sit there and whinge about it or blame the estimators, which used to be the old sort of thing that you do, or you can be part of the solution, not the problem. So I took the view, I want to be part of a solution. So I moved into running a cost planning team, looked after multiple academies and schools in the Birmingham schools for the future program, and learned a lot around how to set projects up properly to make sure the scope was right, again, make sure the cost was right, make sure cost planning, benchmarking was undertaken, market testing was undertaken, all of those cool things. And so, I fancied that change. That's not to say that what I hadn't done before I didn't enjoy, because I did. But, we only live once. So if you keep on doing the same thing every day, I'm somebody who doesn't like doing that. I'm somebody who wants to go, right, well, I've done that. I've nearly perfected it or done it enough, should we say. Time to do something different. So I actually moved into to do cost planning for a couple of years, and it was great. Absolutely loved it. Met some great people. Earned the right of being referred to as one of the trusted advisors to the Birmingham City Council, second to my boss, which was a real huge honour to have. And just learnt a load out of that process.
Because there's sometimes a bit of a stigma going from sort of post-contract to pre-contract in terms of, some would classify cost planning, estimating as boring. But what was your experience with it, Julian?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's two key things really to understand for those who have done it. Cost planning is quite different to estimating, insofar as the traditional estimator literally will just price what is on a set of drawings in its truest sense. Cost planning requires much more thinking. So you have to go, well, what if about this? What if about that? Clearly the drawings don't show that. So I need to give some thought to this. I need to give some thought to that. It deals very much in conceptual metrics, and it deals much more in cost, as it says, cost planning. So it's putting those sort of things together. If you don't like numbers, then yeah, it's probably not for you. But then I would say QSing is not for you if you don't like numbers. Just wasting your time. But you'd sit there, you'd do the measuring, you'd work out the metrics. How do I save money? How do I make it more efficient? How I do all those sort of things. So it's not just a case of, there's 400 linear meters of drainage on the drawing, therefore it is that. Yes, there is 400 linear meters of drainage on the drawing. Yeah, right. But how can you save money on that? Is there a quicker way of going? Could you get it? Can you put the connections the other way? Is the drainage actually flowing in the right direction? Because a lot of the time, going back to, I said, my training with cut and shuffle, I know how to check drainage. So, I could tell if it was running the wrong way up, and that happened quite a few times. Actually, the designer just stuffed it up, got it running the wrong way. So you were fixing those problems early doors, and you were putting something in scope and setting it up that it was guaranteeing success, not only for the contractor, which was Bovis Lend-Lease, but also for the client being Birmingham City Council. And you had a two-hat role where there was a temporal balance between making sure you're getting value for money, but also not selling Bovis, as in your employer, down the road with a price that was just not achievable. So I would say no. If you're looking at purely estimating, and if you find it boring, what are you missing out from? Well, you're probably missing out on a few things with estimating. One is you're thinking about the principles, looking at productivity, linking all of that stuff together. So if you're civils, you should be understanding mass hall and how that sort of works, method, sequencing. Those are key issues to that. Doing an estimate and doing it well can actually win the job as much as it can lose a lot of money. So understanding that, looking at the scope and making sure you're across your numbers, to me is fascinating again, because you've got to make sure that that's what you're doing, and then you're handing that over to delivery team that then have to meet and execute on basically what you have philosophically or in your mind built. So a good estimators or good cost planners, of which a couple have moved into PQS inside. They will literally look at a set of drawings and go, well, how does the logistics work? So that in a building job, where's the tower crane sited, for example? How does that work? Is it going to do those things? Do we need a tower crane? Can we do it with, telescopic handlers all the way up to floor 10 or whatever? Being deliberately facetious on that. But there's a lot of thought process that goes into that. So good estimators aren't people that just sit there going, well, it's $50 or £30, whatever, a square meter or cost for this. They actually know. And they've also looked at how this thing gets built, which is actually the key thing. And when they develop their basis of estimate, as they now get called, there's enough in there that you can actually just pick it up and work with it. And it actually works well. One of the biggest problems I find, certainly with Australia, is they don't do generally a 90-day handover. So they don't deliver to the estimator's plan. Sometimes they just rip it up and go on a completely different tangent and then wonder why they lost a load of money. Well, because you didn't follow the philosophy. It's as simple as that. So good estimators are basically like rocking horse thingamybobs, and are incredibly valuable in that whole process. Good cost planners, exactly the same, because you're looking at, sometimes on the client side, you're looking at setting the budget, making sure the parameters are correct, making sure you've done what we used to call design to cost, got all the metrics right, got the efficiencies out of the building to the best you can squeeze it, or left a few opportunities in there if you're looking to sell it to a contractor for value engineering. So there's a lot in that field that people perhaps actually don't understand, which might be why they think it's boring. Personally, when I've done those, I've got a lot out of it, and then if you're moving into the real specialist side of things, which is the process industry, things like oil and gas, or as we're now doing renewable, that's an even bigger skill set. I mean, I've been literally the last couple of years exposed to tunneling. Had no idea about tunneling. I just thought it was exactly that, a tunnel. The science behind that, wow, there's a lot. I'm not going to pretend for 1 second I'm an expert. I would say I'm proficient now and dangerous enough to know enough to be dangerous in tunneling. So there's always something to learn. There's always something to improve your skill sets on, and there's always somewhere to put focus to. So yeah, I think I'd struggle with if people were to have that view, and that's fine if they do. I mean, there's plenty of other things you can do in construction if putting the numbers together and working out the plan isn't for you.
Guys, I'm interrupting this podcast today to give you some information as to what I actually do every single day. So I own and operate a business called Get In Executive Recruitment. We're a specialist boutique recruitment company, and we specialize purely in the pre-construction and commercial construction markets globally. We're really well known and respected for our work in estimating, cost management, quantity surveying, and contract administration. Because we're hyper niche, we don't have millions of candidates. We don't really even have thousands, but more times than not, we have the right candidate for the right job at the right time. time. Unlike a lot of recruitment agents out there, we are super experienced in what we do. We understand the market, we understand what makes our clients tick and our candidates tick too. Each and every single assignment we work on undergoes an extensive executive search process. It's robust and it works 100% of the time. We've also got a team of 5 researchers who map our markets out globally within our niche. They're amazing. They allow us to work fast, which saves our clients time and money too. So if you're interested in our process, drop us a message. Now back to the episode.
No, I agree totally. It's I think it's fascinating, and also the opportunities that come from a base in pre-construction, or whether that's cost planning, estimating, design, even. There's so many opportunities for growth in many different ways. What was the reason then you decided to emigrate to Australia, Julian? What was the real sort of motivator for you?
So again, I'd worked for a couple of fantastic companies, and Bovis Lendlease was probably the one that I really grew, and if you cut me, you'd have probably seen blue sort of thing. I became the regional commercial manager for the southern region with the defence business, and it was great. I loved it, and I was 35 at the time, and I just had this view in my head I was going to die at 70. So on that basis, I'd done 50% of my life, and I sat there and I thought, well, I know what the next stage is in Bovis Lendlease in terms of getting to commercial director, and salary-wise, it's the difference between whatever I was driving. I think it was like a Volkswagen Golf or a Passat, something like that, moving to an Audi. It's the same bloody car. It's just got a different badge on it. Or the difference in salary would mean that I would no longer go to, let's say, Cornwall on holiday. I'd be lucky enough to go to Spain. It's just different. It's just hot. And, that whole 2.4 style, well, I've got 3 kids, but the 2.4 style of children and all the rest of it. And I just thought, this has become, as Beckett describes it, l'homme mécanique, the mechanical man. So it's get up, follow routine, follow routine, follow routine. Well, I know really then how these next 35 years are going to pan out. So that life has been lived. How about I just throw it all in the bin and do something completely out of character, go wild, go to the other side of the world, and completely start again, and even start again from behind. Why not? And that's what I decided, and the wife was on board with that as well. She's a nurse, and we sort of looked and thought, well, there's potentially opportunity. I mean, she's done exceptionally well as it goes now, but back then we just thought, take a couple of years off and retire. She told everybody, focus on sort of bringing the kids up and embedding them, and just generally living a quality of life that you could only in your wildest dreams imagine. So that was really the whole drive behind it. It wasn't about, oh wow, these exciting projects and all the rest of it. And the reason for choosing Queensland was purely I liked watching the Queensland Reds, and the deal with the wife was when we came over, as long as I could live on a bus route, which is the 385 in the Gap, to get me into the city to watch the Queensland Reds, I was happy. And that was the level of thought process that we put into it. And I'm sure most people who've lived expat lives have probably put the same level of thought into things, because I think if you really did sit down and think about it, you probably wouldn't do it, because it's like there's more risk than there is reward. Well, I don't see it that way. Australia, I can categorically say, is a country where the opportunity is boundless, and if you're prepared to work hard, put your head down and do it, you actually get rewarded, and you can be successful. If I look at Britain, you couldn't. There's always some price ceiling. There's always something holding you back, whether it be some latest scheme on how to tax the shit out of you again in that middle class level, or how to do something that just kept you in your little space that you could never go up. That you don't get that in Australia. And that's why I love this place. I love this country with a passion. If you're genuinely entrepreneurial, if you've genuinely got something about you, you'll be successful here. And that's just amazing.
It's something that's how I describe it as well. Like you can grow so quickly in Australia. Say for example, it would take you 20 years to maybe become a director in the UK. With the right aptitude, the right person, you could do it in half the time. In Australia. So the opportunities are, as you say, are boundless, and the speed of being able to claim those opportunities is pretty unique as well. I think we were talking at the start of the show about nearly having to take a step back a little bit to move forward. Taking sort of having to reprove yourself in Australia. But was that the case, Julian? Did you have a period of time where you sort of had to, I guess, reestablish yourself?
Oh, totally. I mean, the step backwards. It took 4 years really of fighting all sorts of issues that I don't really want to go into on this to get through that. But eventually I did in around 2017. Yeah, but those first 4.5, 5 years were really hard. 2017 to 2024, where we are today, it's just absolutely flown. So once you can get past those preconceptions or people deliberately trying to counteract or impact your career for whatever reasons they've got, once you can get past that, you're up and running. But that's also the nature sometimes of when you are prepared to do that, because I look at what I've got today and where I am, and I'm eternally grateful for it. And I think part of having to do those extra hard yards or to deal with particularly unpleasant individuals over a period of time, it makes you enjoy it when you're working with good people and you've got those opportunities. And again, it sort of coincides, I guess, with when I'm in my 40s now. When you turn 40, you become bizarrely quite philosophical, and people I've noticed similar in that they take a stage and they go, well, I'm not so desperate on climbing the ladder to become the world dominator. I actually just want to do interesting projects. I want to work with good people, and I want to go home and feel like I added value to the whole process. And that actually coincided with my move actually into pure consulting. Back again, almost full circle, I guess. So yeah, I mean, these things, like all things, are there's challenges, but you've got two ways of dealing with challenge. It's they say fight or flight, isn't it? Really, and I chose to fight.
What obviously you start over your career so far, you're building up experience in a whole range of different sectors. What was the sector that you felt was really eye opening, or it was something that you maybe felt like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this? You mentioned tunnels there. I know that you've done infrastructure, LNG, mining, the whole range. What sector really sort of woken you up, I suppose?
Oh, I think I'd probably have to break it out into two different countries. So the building industry in the UK is phenomenal. Absolutely love it. The building industry over here has some real issues. So some fundamental issues that we could spend hours going through why there's such big problems with it. I think for me, the one that's been the most eye-opening of late has been working in the renewable sector, in particular doing pumped hydro. And the reason is because it's effectively, from a planning and programming perspective, it's actually 3 projects in one. There's no other sector that I've come across where that actually happens. So oil and gas is very much about civils, come out the ground, get yourself set up, and then it's heavy processing, and it's a lot of what they call FICs, which field inspection checklist, and making sure things are signed off and making sure your commissioning's done and all that. It's very interesting stuff. In terms of the challenge on having to work out that you're building a dam, you're doing a tunnel, and then you've got to fit out 400, 500 meters beneath ground to build this powerhouse to actually make the pumped hydro work. Wow. I mean, that's what these pumped hydro jobs are. So you've got three for the price of one. In terms of, and I've done a lot in the water sector as well, but in terms of buildings, I think if you were looking in that, I think the eye-opening thing there is, one, be very careful when you're going to do residential projects, because there's a load of issues there. So those are massively eye-opening. Commercial was very eye-opening. I noticed doing the supermarkets that they don't put liquidated damages in the UK, because quite frankly, if you don't perform, you don't get it again. So that was a very opening, different way of approach to how to be commercial and how to make things happen. And then if I look at, I did Gloucester Quays, which I was lucky enough to do. That's my home city, and build the city there. again, that was driven by fast track development, looking at a return on capital employed and yield. So, the sectors in themselves, yes. I think the thing to take from what I'm gabbling on about really is the outcome basis, right? So understand what your client is looking for, right? Now, whether you're a contractor or you're a consultant, it doesn't matter in that regard. What is the outcome of this project? So if they're a developer, what is it that's going to make them tick over? And to be a good QS, or commercial as we're now called, you need to do that, because then you can know how to make money for yourself as well as to make money for your client, because you're aligned in their key drivers. As soon as you do that, it becomes very easy to find that alignment piece, or the completely overly used term now and misappropriated, collaborative. You can actually it's actually cooperative, to be honest. It's a complete misuse. So you can get that alignment so both businesses work with a synergy to them, but they've obviously got different end goals. One is to make profit for its shareholders over here. The other one, if it's government, is to deliver for its shareholders, being the community, being stakeholders, being us. Or it is, developer in that space of looking to sell to their own ongoing customers. So, yeah, I probably struggle with because I'm doing pub title at the moment, to say which sector I got the most out of, because they all provide fascinating insights into. It's like when you're doing your degree, every single subject you do has a relevance to it. Finding why those relevances become, as you start to get more consciously competent, I think is where it all fits, and you go, well, I get it now. I can see why all these things do what they do.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I think there's so many things to take away from that, and quite often nowadays, I think employees can get pigeonholed. So for example, you do residential, you end up spending 10, 20 years in residential. And maybe that's an Australian thing. You see guys who maybe are in defence will only do in defence. Or employers will only want someone with a track record in that space. Which is understandable, but again, people can transfer their skills very, very easily. What was it like moving back into the consultancy environment, Julian? And what did you find there was any similarities there between the UK consultancy work and the Australian consultancy work?
Probably not, no, because I think that the UK, I was very much the traditional quantity surveyor, which really doesn't have a huge market standing here. So you've got, if I think of it, you've got companies like Gardner, Theobald, Arcadis, I think they're now called, EC Harris, whatever it is, Faithful and Gould. There's some big like PQSE houses in the UK, Turner and Townsend, I guess. Well, that there's plenty of them around, right? And they have a market presence, but they do roles like employers agents. They do all those other sort of things. That doesn't really exist here. This is a country driven very much by three professions, I guess. One being lawyers, second being accountants, third being civil engineers. So a lot of the structure here, because the QS doesn't exist in theory, it's sort of set it up to sort of go with those three streams. So you automatically find quite a few challenges in there. So the advisory side of things that I moved into is what they call transaction management, which is just a posh name for procurement. And after doing plenty of procurement projects for contractors over the years, there's some level of similarity in that. But again, the key thing was to get in there and learn quickly and listen. Learn and listen. What does your client want? What's the outcome? What's the objectives of what you're looking to do? And take those skills and apply what you've learned over those years. But also then think about what I don't know. So, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. So challenge yourself to say, well, what don't I know? And in my case, in that one, straight away, I knew I didn't know anything about transformation, which is the first procurement gig I did, and didn't have a clue. But I went out of my way to find out, well, who does? Who do I go and speak to? How do I learn from this? So again, it goes back to, whatever degree you've done, that basis that you get taught of how to research something, how to find out, how to do this, how to start to work out what is the problem I need to solve. So that the whole commercial advisory side of things, being the procurement, being the transactions and facilitations that I did, was great. It was eye opening. The dispute stuff, well, that was just the same. It's the same sort of skills, it's the same sort of applications, and it depends then whether you're being independent or you're being an advocate in that regard. Again, if you're doing independency, it's not really an issue. If you're being an advocate, you would need to understand what is the client looking to get out. And this is probably where I find a lot of issues can come with Australia. Is it's a very litigious culture. It's probably second only to America from what I've seen. And so what we would call commercial outcomes are a bit further down the pigeonhole, unless you can get in to talk to the client straight away and actually say, well, look, how do you want this to go? Because, you need to start to think long term. You've got to stop thinking, which they do. A lot of people do transactionally. And what I mean by transactionally isn't the misused transaction that gets called transaction. Transaction is, you're looking at it just by one project. So they don't look programmed. So conceptually, for those in the UK, Birmingham schools was a program of works. So you didn't just go in there and hit them for one and hit them with claims for one and not worry about it, right? You had to think long term. Defense projects generally are the same. There's a level of, they can't, although they still treat one at a time transactionally, but when you get onto a program, you've got to think differently. It's a completely different mindset. It's about what's the long term. So when you get into for example, Sydney Water's got its P4S network. There's a program of works. So you'll see, if you go to see a program of works, the maturity of people's thinking, the long-term strategy of people's thinking, and not the transactional, well, I just need to win this one because that's all that matters. And I think, that view of as a consultant being, because I've worked for contracting for so long as well, being able to see both sides of the coin, or both sides of the table, I think has been invaluable, because I can advise people on, well, look, if you carry on down this is probably what's going to happen, and this is how you're going to get spanked, right? And then in the alternative, I can sort of do that. So it helps you to facilitate and drive really good commercial outcomes for people. And within the consulting space over the 7 years, it's changed. So how you interact with certain governments is different, because for those who aren't familiar in the UK, this is like the United States. They are different states, they are different territories, they have different rules, they have different laws. So going to each state is different, and there's a different approach you have to take with each government within that state, which you'll start to notice when you do more and more of it.
No, that's big time. I feel like there's different cultures nearly in each state to some extent. Because you can nearly, you walk into the street, you can sort of go, well, he's probably from Queensland, or he's from Victoria. You sort of just get an idea of there's quite unique sort of characteristics and cultures, and I would say Queensland's quite it's very relationship driven, super relationship driven. You'll see New South Wales will be a bit more transactional, just because of the the population size and that sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot of merit to that. Obviously, over time you've built some incredible connections. You've been at a really senior level, Julian, director level of consultancies and global businesses and that sort of thing. What made you decide to step out on your own, go forward and build your own sort of business from scratch?
Oh, look, I think what it boils down to in consulting is it's driven by what they call billables, right? And there's utilization rates and utilization factors. And so you get a lot of pressure put on you to build, right? And to have this team around you that you have to keep busy and lots of mouths to feed. And at the end of it, you get a pretty good salary, so you can't complain at that. But I guess the question you have to ask yourself is the salary commensurate with the effort? My view was no. In the end, and I wanted to do my own thing. I also wanted to have flexibility of choice to do what I do, which is to bounce all over the place and do different sides of industry when it suits, when it happens. So if I was to, I'll use HKA actually as an example. So HKA, similar to a lot of consulting companies, they have an advisory, they have a claims disputes, they have a clean expert side, right? So straight away they're looking to sell good services to clients. The problem then becomes is you can end up being conflicted out. So you might have as we did back then, one of the best clean experts around in quantum or delay. And they wanted to work on the Sydney Rail job because, that's the one to be on. But they couldn't be there because we were in there doing transaction management. We were doing commercial advisory. We were doing X, Y, and Z. And so that's one of the challenges these bigger businesses face. And that means that to some extent with your own personal career, you can be limited just because that's how the business operates. And by the way, that's not unique to them. That's all consultants are pretty much the same. I enjoy working for tier one contractors just as much as I enjoy working for principals. So a lot of consultants don't have that ability to do that. And it's something I wanted to own and do. And at the time of making the decision to make the step out, I'd also obviously picked up that project director role with Gladstone Area Water Board and really wanted to focus on that. So I had to set up my own business because the company that I was working for, it would be completely unreasonable to have stayed with them because we were doing tenders, so I was conflicted. So I couldn't go and talk to contractors, which were their main clients. I couldn't go and talk to other government because of probity issues. And so it was actually a selfish choice by me, probably one of the only selfish choices I've ever made. But it was like, now I'm out, I'm doing this. And I haven't looked back. And we've got a huge network of people that work with me as partners. And we've all made that same stage, that choice in life that we want to do that. Some have done it for work-life balance reasons. You don't come to this country and, I still got to get my head around why I don't do that. But you don't come to this country and just work every single hour. You should be looking at the work-life balance that comes here, being outdoors, doing all those sort of cool things. And that's what's here. So it becomes a very personal choice as to what you want to do. For me, I've sort of decided I want to drive as hard as I can to about 2032, which is coincidentally with the Olympics. Hopefully, I have enough to probably knock it on the head, and then really just very much just choose the things we can do, and then the wife and myself going on a tour of the world. That's the plans we've got. We might even end up working as we go around there, but want to go out and see the world. Like I said before, you've only got one life, so as far as we all know, so maximize it and get what you can out of it, and that includes in your career. Do interesting projects. Don't, as you said, unless it's your thing, do 20 years in residential, 10 years of just residential, because it's not challenging you. You're not going to grow as a person. Would be my advice.
And that's so true. We spend so much of our life in work that what is challenging you day to day is challenging you as a person as well. It's not just our lives aren't that compartmentalized that that we have that sort of that fortune. But I guess in sort of wrapping up the show today, Julian, you provide some really, really interesting insights. How would you describe the market at the moment for what you do, in Australia as a whole?
Understaffed, I think, is probably the simple answer. We've got, so Queensland, to put it in context, when I came over, I was with a company, and I remember being on there and they said we got 25 years worth of oil and gas in front of us when I joined in 2012. By 2014, those 25 years had gone faster than I've ever seen. And Queensland went into a complete just do nothing, muck about, do nothing process. It's had this wake up call now where it's got a huge backlog to do of water, dams, infrastructure needs to be put in place. There's an Olympics that people keep forgetting about and need to plan for. Renewables programs with all the carbon targets. So the amount of work that's coming through now is phenomenal. So the opportunity to come here, or if you're here already, and to make a difference is probably, I guess, like no other in the world at present. Save for, I know Saudi Arabia is obviously getting a lot of people going over there as well, but then that comes with its challenges of a culture. So I think, to me, it's just a great opportunity for all people really to yes, do well, make money out of this, because why else would you do it? Work on some fascinating projects, on some interesting assignments, grow as a person, and actually help to to shape a country that's developing at a pace like the 1880s in America with its little gold rushes, and be part of something that reshapes a society that looks and is quite different to probably where you originally came from.
100%. It's such an exciting time in Queensland, especially, from a, if you're looking at Australia, Queensland is burgeoning. It's absolutely flying at the moment. Sort of just going off the sort of final sort of question today, Julian. Obviously, for someone who's so experienced like yourself, but what would you say a quantity surveyor should invest time in improving? If there was one thing that they can improve, what would you say that should be?
It has to be really, your focus has to be with this market. So to be relevant, your focus has to be contract, very much contract focused. So if you take the quantity surveying profession and bifurcate it down to say we deal with entitlement, which is the contract side of things, we deal with valuation, which is the secondary part. The majority of the time Australia spends its emphasis is in the entitlement space, and no one ever seems to get round to worrying too much about the valuation afterwards. So you can be brilliant at doing the valuation stuff. So if you want to choose a path to go into expert work, go for it. All right, stay there, keep doing that. That's your path. If you want to stay in, should we say, tier 1 contractor world, or tier 2 or tier 3, or we want to do client, it's probably your focus has to be contract. So those would be my recommendations. Awesome.
I've absolutely loved this conversation today, Julian. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I feel like nearly an hour has went past super quick. I feel like we could go for nearly another hour. If there's anyone out there, I do get a lot of young QSs that might sort of want to pick your brain, ask a question here and there. What's the best way to get in contact with you, or even maybe future clients?
Oh, look, I mean, there's the website, which I've actually missed two inquiries came through, and I didn't realize it was working. Look, I mean, I actually will respond. So I've been brought up as a QS that as an RICS, you had 3 rings on the phone and you had to answer it. I'm still to some extent in that thing. So email, the LinkedIn, if you connect or send a message through LinkedIn, happy to do that. Or any of the other sort of forums. I'm relatively active in RICS, not as much as I used to be. AIQS I'm active in, and I'm a committee member now with the Chartered Institute of Civil Engineers and Surveyors. So those sort of 3 QS areas, by all means, do that. And I'm more than happy to help as much as I can. I've been very lucky to have some phenomenal mentors in my career. And so I believe that the likes of myself and others are duty bound to give back. Perhaps not always what people want to hear, but certainly we are duty bound to provide the knowledge that we've been imparted, because that's actually how the construction industry, unlike a lot of industries, I think, separates itself out. People do want to share knowledge and want to help others. And
I think it's imperative, with the amount of sort of retirees we're going to have in the next sort of 10 years, we really need to pass that information on, as it's no good, if it isn't shared. But Julian, absolutely pleasure to have you on the show today. I've really loved the episode, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Before you go today, guys, I'm just going to ask you to do one thing. Can you please go to Apple right now or Spotify right now and just give us those 5 stars? Hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference you wouldn't believe. The whole idea of this show is to inspire, educate, and motivate our listeners. And we only do that if we're getting the best guests. The best guests want to see data. They want to see information. They want to see how many listeners that we get. And so all of this stuff is really, really important. So if you can just literally go and do that today, if you enjoy the show, just go and hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We're going to continue to push this out there every Monday. So if you can, hit that 5-star button. And if you can't, even share it with a friend. Go on to WhatsApp, flick it on to your crew. Guys, thank you so much for listening. On to next week.